This week, I had the deep privilege of holding space for Jen Burgard's stories. She shared 3 stories, each beautiful and difficult in its own right. And her story as a whole paints a picture of a person who endured so much and worked so hard to provide milk for her babies. Jen's story includes the tragic loss of her son, Henry, and her willingness to share this story shines a light on a systemic failure that affects so many people who suffer the tragedy of infant loss. No one to support them with managing the milk, which begins as early as 16 weeks gestation. As you listen, first of all, take care of yourself. If you aren't ready for a story of infant loss, come back to this one when you are ready. But secondly, ask yourself, why? Why was there no one to help Jen problem solve her breastfeeding mysteries? Why did the lactation providers shrug their shoulders? Why didn't anyone offer her counseling about her options on what to do about her milk? October is Infant Loss Awareness Month. And so, as a part of the awareness puzzle, this episode we focus on Jen's story and yours. And we say that the system isn't supporting us well enough. And if you have suffered a loss and felt the white tears of your milk filling in your mammary glands and did not know what to do, I say, I am sorry. We must do better for you. I hope you find healing in Jen's beautiful story. When I began breastfeeding, I was blindsided by how difficult it was. I may have thought I was prepared, but having known only a handful of people who had ever breastfed and only seeing it up close from a couple of them, I had a huge learning curve. Since then, I've become a doula, a lactation consultant, and a childbirth educator. I'm your host, Lo Nigrosh, and I welcome you to the Milk Making Minutes, where we explore breastfeeding experiences through the lens of systemic barriers, so that you know your breastfeeding struggles are not your fault, and your triumphs really are the miracles you feel they are.
Hi, Jen. Welcome to the Milk Making Minutes. I'm so glad you're here.
Thank you for having me. I'm so glad to be on.
Yeah, so before we get into your baby feeding stories, I would like you to take a minute to introduce yourself.
Sure. My name is Jen Burgard, and I live in the upper Midwest, and I have had 3 wonderful babies and 3 very different breastfeeding journeys with each of them.
Great. Okay, so we'll get into that. And I know you also host a podcast yourself.
I do. I host a podcast called Haven Landscape of Loss, and we're a podcast that speaks with parents who have experienced the death of a child. We speak with providers and different members of the community, all circling around the aspect of child loss and bringing awareness to that topic, as well as just sharing stories and helping other parents not feel so alone.
Yeah, and I haven't talked to you much. We just chatted back and forth, but I know that this topic kind of plays into your baby feeding stories a little bit.
Absolutely. Absolutely, it does. And we'll definitely, I think, get into that.
Yeah. Okay. And I'm so thankful for you coming on to share about that, because I know so many people experience loss in their journeys to becoming parents and throughout. And it does impact baby feeding.
Yes, it does.
Yeah.
Very much.
People feel alone in it sometimes. They don't quite know how to talk about it, or if they talk about it, people say the wrong things, or they try to connect, but they connect in really insensitive ways.
Yeah, and I think I love to give basically everyone the benefit of the doubt and just say you do your best you can and you try to say something. And I think saying something is better than nothing, but acknowledging and maybe giving yourself space to say, maybe what I'm saying isn't quite right. Can you please correct me? And please have both parties of a conversation being open and willing to talk about that and learn. And I think that can be true about breastfeeding also, right? I think it's all about being comfortable talking about it and getting these issues out there for folks to hear and understand.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, before we get too deeply into that, let me take you back to before you were feeding babies. And ask about what your exposure to breastfeeding was before you yourself were doing that.
I was a child of the 80s, and I know that formula at that time, at least up in this area, was a big what to do. But I came from a family that we didn't have a lot of money. And so I was exclusively breastfed for 2 years by my mother. And proudly, she will tell me every day, right? and that's wonderful. But I think at that time, they were touting formula as a healthier option for babies, but we just didn't have the money. So breastfed it was. And so I grew up in a very large extended family, and the women in my family would breastfeed. And growing up in my teenage years and all of that, it was very normal in just our family gatherings to just breastfeed out in the open, because that's just what you did. And all the women did it. And my mother was one of 11. That's just how it was done.
Wow. Yeah, yours is actually an unusual story. I do sometimes hear that people's parents breastfed, but then they were so little they don't remember seeing it. And then they never saw it until it was them. Or maybe they had a friend or two talk about it, but they never saw it up close and personal.
And I always knew from when even after I got married, even considered thinking about babies, I knew I wanted to breastfeed. I wasn't sure how that was going to go. I was like, this is weird. In my mind, I couldn't make the connection.
So even after having seen it so much throughout your teenage years, there still was that disconnect between you having seen it and feeling like you could do it yourself?
Yes, absolutely. Wow. I still was like, it's hard to imagine things you've never experienced yourself.
Yeah. Did you make any goals around timing, amount of time you wanted to feed?
I didn't. And okay. I waited till my 30s to start having children. And so I'd had a lot of friends that were breastfeeding and had either chosen not to or chosen to breastfeed by that time. In talking with them about their experiences, I remember one mom gave me some fantastic advice, and that made me feel better about it. She said, you know what? Every morning when you wake up, you can choose if I'm going to breastfeed today, and then you just decide that day. Don't say, I'm going to do this for 2 years and lock yourself into this thing that feels unattainable. Just get up every day, and if you can do it, you do it. I'm like, okay, that's a good way to look at it. And that did help in some of the rough times. Okay, it's okay. Just do what you can do. And I felt like I had a good handle on what it was going to be like, and I had some great folks to look up to. Yeah. But you never know what you're going to be dealt with, right? Until it's your turn.
Yeah, absolutely. And did you besides having those conversations with friends, did you do anything else to prepare or learn about breastfeeding?
No, I was on pregnancy blogs and I bought all the things. I bought everything I could come up with. I was like, I'm going to have the nipple creams. I'm going to have 6 different kinds, all natural ones, and make sure they're super safe. And I'm going to take these vitamins. Oh, I'm going to make lactation brownies. I was buying brewer's yeast at the natural food store. Oh yeah, I was into it. I was ready.
Yeah. And was it helpful having all of those things, or in hindsight, did it make you feel like you needed all of this stuff in order to breastfeed?
No, I don't think so. I don't think it was hurtful at all. I felt prepared. Okay. I feel like those things were there to support me as needed. Just like my breast pump. Like I got the best breast pump I could find and tons of things. Just you don't know what you're going to need. And so that's what I did.
Okay. So it really helped you feel prepared to do that.
Jen said her first birth was largely uncomplicated, having an induction at 39 weeks, resulting in a vaginal delivery. She experienced immediate skin-to-skin and received support from lactation consultants in the hospital. She felt set up for success when she went home, having embarked on her breastfeeding journey. As you listen, think about how confident you felt leaving the hospital. What contributed to your level of confidence? And looking back, was it founded? Was the support you received enough? What support could you have used upon leaving the hospital once the work of breastfeeding continued?
I felt really confident about it. And so we headed home, and I set out on this, journey to breastfeed, and that was going to be the only way I would feed. And I did that for probably 2 weeks. And I will say that the first few days was great because she was so sleepy and my milk hadn't really come in yet. And then when it did, I thought, oh, this is it. This is going to be great. My breasts are huge. This is going to be fantastic. And I started feeding her, but she kept falling asleep. And I was like, oh, I've just got a sleepy baby. So I would Google and try to find what to do, try to keep her awake, take her clothes off. Yep, took her clothes off. That would wake her up, feed her. But this little girl would latch on and would not stay awake. And finally I said, fine, I'll let her sleep. And so I'd feed her until she fell asleep, try to keep her awake, put her down in her bassinet. 4 minutes later, she was awake. And I'm like, okay, now she's going to eat. So we continued this cycle, and she was constantly on one of my breasts. So I'd try switching. I'd try just cooling her off, keeping the room cold, changing locations, not rocking her, standing, all these different things. And I couldn't figure it out. And then I started to get worried that she wasn't getting food and that maybe my milk supply wasn't as good as I thought it was. So I'd read that, you could try feeding her. And then once she falls asleep, then go and pump and just see if you can make sure to keep that production going. I said, okay. Well, and then they said, then it's good to have a backup. Then you have some backup supply. So I started doing that, but sure enough, 5 minutes, 7 minutes into pumping, she'd wake up. And so I get rid of everything and get her to feed. And it just felt like she was never getting a good feed and then going to sleep and then waking up 2 hours later, get a good feed, go to sleep. We just never had any kind of system or consistency. I remember my mom came to visit and she said, you got to just keep trying. I said, yep, I will. And I saw my physician and we talked about it. And she said, there's this little thing called a nipple shield that you could try. She said, maybe because my nipple at that point had really gotten raw, like anyone's, right? But it was excruciating. And so I said, if I'm going to keep doing this, I've got to do something. This has got to get better. And so I tried the nipple shield and it worked and it helped for a little while. And that seemed to solve some problems for maybe a week. And then my mom came and just said, she can tell that it's not the real thing. And I said, okay, thanks. And she goes, I think you need to stop using it. Because by that point, it had plateaued again. And I was having trouble again. So I said, okay. So I got rid of the nipple shield. And then I brought back the nipple shield. And then I got rid of it. And it went like this for weeks. And I went to my doctor and baby wasn't gaining as much weight. And I had lactation consultants. They said, she's getting a good latch. And she's just sleepy and she just doesn't stay awake. And I didn't know what to do. At this point, I was still committed to breastfeeding, but I finally said, I think, and this was probably 7 weeks in, I said, I think I'm going to have to primarily pump just to make sure she's getting enough food because it felt like a good enough supply. And so I started pumping and feeding her that way. And then that's when we made a move cross country. And so it really worked best for that move. It was a 17, 18-hour trip with an 8-week-old baby. But then when we got back, when we got to where we were living, I said, okay, now I'm going to try this again. Maybe she's bigger. I've got the hang of it. So we tried breastfeeding again, and we tried it for weeks. And again, she just stopped gaining weight, kept falling asleep. And I didn't know what to do. And that's where my lactation brownies came in and all my other little tricks. Tried drinking dark beer. So I tried a dark beer and all these different things. And in the end, I ended up going strictly pumping and bottle feeding. And I did that for a year. And I felt really good about it. And the only reason I stopped was because I was doing this pumping thing, and every time I had to go pump, I felt like I had to leave my daughter with someone else, with my husband or my mom or someone, and go up to this room by myself and pump. And it got to be really lonely because you do it so many times a day. And I was back at work, so I was pumping at work, of course, because that's definitely a thing. And it just got hard. And finally I said, I don't want to have a bad feeling about breastfeeding. And so I'm going to wean off just because I want to have more kids. And for those kids, I want to be able to breastfeed for them. I don't want to feel resentful of this experience because right now this is miserable and this is lonely and I'm sad and I'm not connecting with my baby. And I had plenty of milk for her to last a long time, thankfully, until she was really going to be doing more solids. And so I felt really good about it. And that was it. That was the end of my first experience, my first child. And I had friends around me and they had kids. My sister, being one of them, had a son after I had my daughter. And she said, oh, I never pumped because it was just so easy. All I had to do is just put him on my breast and he'd eat and we'd be done. And I'm like, oh, yeah, that it looks like the life. Like, that's what I want. I want that easy button. I want it to feel like a connection, a bonding moment. And ever since I left the hospital, it didn't. It never felt like a bonding moment because it always felt like work and we were trying to make something work that just wasn't going to work. And I never understood why. I never understood why. Now I do. But I didn't then. We'll get to it, but we'll get to my thoughts on that. But so it took me a long time to get pregnant with my second child, my son. And I tried for over a year to get pregnant with him. And I finally did. And I thought, okay, this one, got this. Having a little boy and he's going to be a great eater. I'll be at home. I've got this support system with my family, my friends here. And that was in 2016. So in 2017, in April, I was exactly 39 weeks to the day once again. And unfortunately, I experienced a complete placental abruption. So this happened while I was at home. It was completely out of nowhere. I had not gotten hurt or an accident or fallen or anything. Nothing. I just woke up in the morning and was making my daughter breakfast. It happened, and we rushed to the hospital, of course, and they did an emergency C-section to get him out. And unfortunately, there was just too much brain damage from the time that the abruption happened to when they were able to get him out. And he lived with us for 13 hours, almost, just about 13 hours in the hospital, which was a miracle in itself. But during that time, they said that he wasn't hungry. He didn't feel pain is what they said. But of course, I'm supposed to be feeding a baby. I knew how this works. I know what I'm supposed to be doing right now. And my body knows, right, what it's supposed to be doing. And it wasn't happening. And then it really didn't hit me until I got home. And I knew that a nurse had said, your milk might come in. I just laughed. I go, it's definitely going to come in. It's for sure going to come in. Your body does not know that your baby died.
Yeah.
And so my milk came in and I panicked. No one had shared any information with me about milk donation, about lactation after loss, about what to expect, emotionally, how that would feel. I panicked. I was terrified. So I reached out to a friend that had chosen not to breastfeed. That was her choice. And I said, what did you do? Because your milk came in. She said, yeah, I just wrapped up my breasts nice and tight and then ice packed them and took a leave until it went away. And I'm like, oh my gosh, that sounds miserable. And I'm like, and by this point, I'm like sweating and I'm engorged. I'm sweating. I'm miserable. And
What day are you at?
Day 3.
Okay.
Yeah. And I went, someone just please bring me a baby to feed. That's all I wanted. Like, my body and my brain was craving a baby.
Of course.
And I had never felt anything like that in my life. I would have fed any baby at that point, which is crazy. But
it's not crazy. That's
not crazy. It's natural.
No, right.
I mean,
yeah.
And so finally, I had to turn to Google once again. Because I had no information, and there's not a ton of information about what to do there either. And I was given, ice packs and cabbage leaves. And I said, cabbage leaves? Are you kidding? So I had my girlfriend go to the store and get me some heads of cabbage. And she shows up, she puts those things in the fridge and tears off leaves, and I put them on my breasts, and I don't know if it works. I have no idea to this day if it really worked, but I smelled like cabbage soup for 3 days straight because I kept just trading out these cabbage leaves and ice packs. And it was the worst experience. And if someone would have let me know that, hey, you could donate this milk,
Mm-hmm.
Number two, a great thing to do is it's okay to express a little bit in the shower, and that will not
Right.
impact your journey. And I didn't know that. I had no
Mm-hmm.
idea. I thought, nope, I'll stay away from the hot water. I only showered with my back to the water. It was a miserable several weeks. Of course, I was grieving my son
Of course. Yeah.
and then dealing with this.
And
And it
on
just
top of that, you have the physical representation in your own body that there is no baby to feed.
and just such a different feeling because when I had my daughter and my milk came in, I was like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. And it was so exciting and I was so proud of my body. But now this was happening and I was so angry at my body for doing what it was supposed to do. And it was so complicated. It was such a complicated emotion. And I will never forget that. And I just think it's so important for women to be educated in the hospital before they leave.
Yes.
Someone you can be and maybe I mean you can be just about any gestation. I would believe, and your milk could come in. I think I don't know what the cutoff kind of is. I don't know if there is a cutoff or if it depends on whether you've breastfed before, but there are women that their milk comes in when they lost their baby at 20 weeks.
Yeah, milk production begins at around 16 weeks of pregnancy.
Okay, there we go. Yeah. So I just think they need to be educated about that. And it's just, it can be missing. I think a lot of hospitals do, I'm sure, do a great job. But that information needs to be out there and available. And so.
Yeah. Oh, I am so sorry that this is your experience. And unfortunately, it's probably the experience of most people who experience a loss. And the reason is because, like, nurses get 2 to 3 hours of breastfeeding education in nursing school, and OBGYNs and pediatricians get about 3 hours in med school of breastfeeding education. So it's not comprehensive enough even just to provide general breastfeeding education. And so then, of course, there's not specialized breastfeeding education to cover things like loss.
Like loss. And since then, I'd even heard of a pill, that some people take. And I remember seeing, I don't even know what it was, but I saw it on some different groups and forums I was in. And I think there was some questioning about safety for future pregnancies about this medication that one could take. And so I certainly wasn't interested in something like that. And yeah, there should be more options. And I don't know, milk donation is such a beautiful thing that a lot of people can do. But if it's not accessible in your area, or if there isn't a milk bank, a dedicated one that provides that service, you're stuck unless you can find some sort of direct place to do that. And again, not every mom who has a loss is going to be comfortable donating their milk. And that is a personal decision.
But decision that each person needs to make for themselves. And for some people, that can be very healing.
Absolutely.
And so if it's presented as an option, quite a few people decide to go ahead and do that, at least for a period of time, while they're dealing with the loss, especially when it's a sudden and unexpected loss.
Right. Yeah, because I do think there probably are, or there definitely are women who know what's going to happen. They know they're going to lose their child and they can make those plans. I know I'm going to lose my child, so here are my options. And that's wonderful. I just don't think everyone has that. So.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yes. What a horrific experience. The loss in and of itself, and then to be dealing with the milk. To be dealing with the milk that was meant for your baby that you don't have.
Right.
And to be having to Google that. Did you have anyone else? I know you said your friend went to get the cabbage leaves for you. Did you have anyone that you were talking to about it, that was helping you process your emotions and also helping you with the physical sensations?
Yeah, I had a couple friends and my sister who were amazing. They want to take the pain. They want to do it for you, and they would be great. Oh, need a new ice pack, need a new and sports bra, I need a clean sports bra. Yeah, I had support. And so all I can think too is there are women going through this that don't have support and that most likely are doing this on their own. And I was lucky to have that. And my husband was incredibly supportive. Because I'd had the C-section, I also wasn't able to even shower on my own at this point. And so I felt like essentially a broken animal. It comes down to that. We're all mammals. And that's how I felt. I didn't feel human even.
Yeah, and then you also had your daughter who was
I
at
have a daughter
home.
who was at home and almost 3 and relied on me for everything.
And
And
was expecting to have a young sibling.
oh yeah, she was expecting it. And that was hard. It was really hard on her. I remember very vividly sitting in this chair, this rocking chair, that I said, this is going to be my chair that I rock Henry in, and I feed him for hours and hours. And then she would curl up in a little blanket by my feet because she knew she couldn't sit on mommy's lap because mommy was hurting. But she would curl up in a little blanket at my feet and just play with her toys there like a little cat. It was the cutest thing. But I took a picture of it one time because I'm like, this looks so much different than it's supposed to. But it's what I have. And it's where I am right now, and all you can do is accept it. You can't change it, unfortunately, but it's all we had.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you taught her what grieving was. And
Yeah, and I think even now, as she's gotten older, she's 8 now, but when she turned 7, we went through a tough time actually with her because she kept telling, I'm missing Henry, I'm missing Henry, and get so upset and start crying, and it would be random, and it would just be at random times, or we'd be together as a family somewhere and she would get sad. And I think now it makes sense that she's grieving now because now she understands what she's missing. Now she's old enough to get it. And so we're walking her through this and going through this with her now instead of back then together. And it brings you back. But I mean, parenthood is tricky, right? Parenthood's hard in general. But I think when you're teaching your kids at such a young age about something so hard, there's definitely not a great playbook for that. There's a lot of different opinions on how one should do it. And I think, as you can tell, my approach is always going to be with honesty, and it's going to be with meeting this topic head on and talking about it will always be my default. But that's something we've struggled with over the last year, is helping her grieve now, because now she gets it.
Wow, this is quite the story. If you are feeling enraged by the lack of support Jen and most other people in this situation feel, I know the right place for your rage. A community where you can put that anger and possibly one day turn that anger into action. I'm building a breastfeeding and baby feeding community like no other from the ground up. It's not like the huge groups where you ask questions about breastfeeding your baby and get 1 million answers that you may or may not be able to trust, although you can ask questions that get answers if that's something that you need there. It's a place where we explore the why behind the breastfeeding difficulties, where we explore our lived experiences in light of systemic and cultural barriers. It feels like the podcast, but in real time. If you don't want your kids to struggle as much as you did to feed your babies, come join me at the Milk Making Minutes community group on Facebook. I can't wait to see you there.
Despite everything that happened, my husband and I did decide that we wanted to have another child. We still wanted to grow our family. And about 7 months after we lost Henry, we started trying for another one. And eventually we were able to get pregnant again. And I was of course, a nervous wreck the entire time.
Yeah, who wouldn't be?
Who
Yeah.
wouldn't be? I'm a healthy young woman who comes from a family of quote unquote baby makers. After my first birth with my daughter, my OB said, "Oh, honey, you are made for having babies." I was like, "Oh, what a great compliment!" But so that made me really encouraged that no, that was such a one-off, and I just need to hope that things are going to be okay this time. And terrifyingly, we went through that pregnancy and went through maternal fetal medicine, and my son, this another one, he was another boy, and we were about 36 weeks, and he was growth restricted. So he wasn't growing as much as they were hoping he would. And we were a little concerned. And just to clarify, too, my daughter was only 5 pounds, 10 ounces when she was born at 39 weeks. So a little peanut. Henry was 6 pounds, 13 ounces. So he was actually a good size. He was my biggest baby. And my third son, or my third child, second son, Leo is his name, he was having some trouble on the monitor. And I was about 36 weeks. They said, I think we're gonna take him. We're going to do a scheduled C-section. We're going to get him out. So we did a scheduled C-section that morning, and he came out. I did not get to do skin to skin with him. He started breathing and he was fine, but then he turned blue. And so they showed him to me, and then they took him over to the table to start working on him immediately. Of course, I was horrified, and I couldn't believe that something was potentially going to happen again. And I stayed in surgery, of course, and they took my son to the NICU and continued to work on him and let me know updates. He's doing okay. We just got him hooked up to a breathing tube. He's going to be fine. They weren't telling me that, but the fear was definitely palpable. And because I had a surgery, they took me up to recovery, and I wasn't allowed to go down to the NICU. So I was up in my room and I couldn't see my son. My husband got to go down there and take pictures of him and come back up and show them to me. But that was it. And that was for 7 hours. I didn't get to see him because they were doing checks on me every 15 minutes. They said, I'm sorry, you can't leave. You need to stay on this floor, and he needs to be in the NICU. And so I didn't even get to see him. Not did I do skin to skin, I didn't see him. And the nurses were so kind. And what's his name? And I said, I don't know. I haven't even seen him yet. I don't know his name. I need to see him, and then I'll tell you his name. But finally, when I was able to see him, I wasn't allowed to touch him. And it was they were just too worried. And then, which I understood and I was fine with, but I knew what I was missing. And so the nurses got me a hospital grade pump and said, well, we want you to start pumping your colostrum, and so that we can try feeding it to him. I was like, how on earth is this going to work? And so legitimately I used a pump, and I would take and try to wipe my colostrum and put it into a little test tube essentially for him. And I could not believe, like, this is just insane to me. But I was like, okay, whatever I got to do. I'm sitting up here in this hospital room. I can't do anything. And so I'll just keep trying to do this. And so that's what I did. And so the only way I could help. And so he had a feeding tube in. He was only 4 pounds, 10 ounces. So he was a little guy. And so, of course, they want to make sure he's getting everything he can. And I continued pumping. It was probably the next day that I finally got to hold him, and they let me take him out and put him on my chest. And that was the first time I got to do any skin to skin with him. And oh, of course, his numbers just skyrocketed in, like, the good way. His oxygen levels went up, and his oxygen level went up, his temperature regulated, his breathing regulated. It was crazy. I mean, just watching it on the monitor, seeing my baby's physical reaction to being held by his mom. And I cried. I just cried because I was so sad. And it made me miss Henry, and it made me love him. And it made me sad about the experience that I was missing. But I also was so grateful. I think I wasn't bitter about it because he was alive. And I think other people that maybe have babies in the NICU, while I'm so compassionate towards their story, and that is hard, it's so hard to not hold them and touch them, but they're alive. And so at the end of the day, I'm fairly certain I get to take this baby home. And so I just kept holding on to that. And that's what kept me going. And that helped me not be bitter. The nurses were great. The NICU doctors were amazing, but I knew they wanted me to take him home as much as I wanted to take him home. But the feeding part was hard. And I kept pumping with this magical giant hospital pump. I wanted one to take home, actually. It was so nice. And I would just keep supplying the nurses with food. And then he was being fed through a tube in his nose. And yeah, that's how he ate for, it had to be a week, if I remember correctly. And until finally he got big enough and got strong enough, they said, you can try breastfeeding, they would say. You can try it. And I just didn't feel, I didn't want to have any negative effect on what he was doing, on his progress. But I also, am I wanting to breastfeed for me from the breast? Am I wanting that for me, or am I wanting that for him? What am I after here? What's the main goal? And I said, my main goal is for him to be healthy and be well so that we can go home. And that meant continuing with the NG tube. And finally, when I did try breastfeeding him, he did okay, but, fell asleep. So we would go back and forth between his tube and breastfeeding. And then eventually it was bottle, which was great when he finally got that thing out of his nose. And all right, you can start feeding him with a bottle. They're weighing him every 6 hours to make sure he's gaining weight. And it was in grams. We're celebrating successes in grams at this point. And he had to be 5 pounds before this. He had to be all these different things. And
Jen, what were the quantities of breast milk that he was getting?
in those early days, it was grams. I'd have to look.
Milliliters.
Or milliliters, yes. Yeah. Milliliters, yeah. It was just tiny.
Okay.
It was just tiny. I couldn't even tell you. We were feeding him with
5 or 10 milliliters,
yes,
something like that. Okay.
Yeah. Yes, 5 or 10 milliliters. Yes, that's absolutely right.
Okay.
And yeah, I went home when we finally were able to take him home. I was so grateful. But at this point, I hadn't done hardly any breastfeeding. I had a big old stash because he was in the NICU for 15 days. So I had a stash of milk that they sent me home with, which was fantastic to have that all ready to go. But I hadn't done any breastfeeding, and I said, no, I really wanted to this time. I really wanted to make this work. So I said, I'm gonna try as soon as he's strong enough. I'm gonna try again, and I did. And I started setting time aside to breastfeed him. It went okay for the first week, but I was absolutely supplemented with bottles just to make sure he's getting enough food. And I even brought him in. He was about 4 to 5 weeks old, and I brought him into what they had was a lactation cafe. So it's where moms can bring their babies in, and they'll help you. The consultants will help you. They'll weigh baby before and after, and all the things we can just be there to support one another in this journey. So I get there and I explain my situation, and they're so great. And I sit down and they helped me. I said, do you think you have a good latch? I'm like, I don't know. And so I have her help me make sure we've got a good latch. She said, yeah, it looks great. She said, oh, he's doing great. I see his little throat moving. He's doing great. I said, great. And I said, I don't know though. Do you feel like he's getting any? I can't tell that he's getting any. And they said, no, I think he's doing okay. We're going to take him up and we're going to weigh him when he's done. And sure enough, he fell asleep, just like my daughter did. Fell asleep, took his clothes off, fell asleep, all these things. He finishes and they go and put him on the scale. And sure enough, he hadn't eaten hardly anything. And I said, this is what I'm saying. I don't understand what's going on. This does not make sense to me. And so again, I felt like I'm trapped in this circle again of trying to, at one point I had him on one breast and I had the pump hooked up to the other one, just try, because at the end of the day, I'm like, my worst fear is that he's not getting any. Second worst fear is because he's not getting any, my milk's going to dry up and I'm going to not be able to supply enough as he gets bigger. And again, I was still so committed to this. And I want it to be like my friends that can just feed their baby anywhere and just 10 minutes they're done. And I'm like, oh, this is a half-hour ordeal for us every time. And it's
Mhm.
washing these bottles, washing these pump parts, sterilizing all this stuff. And I'm just going, I've got a lot on my mind.
I want to stop and honor this sentiment for a moment. I have heard this from so many people who just wanted the ease of feeding their babies from their own bodies whenever and wherever, and the easy button wasn't there for them. If this was you, it's okay to mourn the loss of the easy button. It's okay to say it was harder for me than for my peers. It's okay to say I tried so damn hard, and it doesn't feel fair that I had to try hard. And I want to tell you, it's not your fault that the easy button didn't appear for you. That is a systemic and cultural failure.
I just want this to be easy, because that's
Yeah.
what these women I'd seen just, this is so much easier. It's so much easier than bottles.
Right.
Why wouldn't you do this? Why wouldn't you do it? And it wasn't working. It wasn't working, but I could get milk when I would pump. And I had so many friends at this time that were all having babies. I actually remember being at a wedding with a bunch of them. And they had set this, it was at a hotel, they had set this conference room aside, and there was 7 of us all in there pumping at the exact same time.
Whoa, that's
because we
amazing.
had little babies.
Did
And
you
we
take
all,
a photo?
oh yeah.
Oh,
It was just like, we're all in here.
good. That's great.
And so I felt like I had such a great community around me that we all wanted each other to succeed in this. And yeah, and I think it wasn't until I had one of those same friends had a baby a while after I did. And I gave up. I eventually gave up trying to feed him from my breast and went to straight pumping. And
About how old was your baby at this point?
he was about 3 months at that point.
Okay.
Yep, I'd stopped.
So you tried at the breast for about 3 months while continuing to pump and supplementing the breast milk. And then at 3 months, you decided
I couldn't do it.
You couldn't do both. Yeah.
No, I couldn't do both. Yeah.
At this point, my lactation consultant brain was working. I began asking Jen a series of questions about both her daughter and her son Leo's breastfeeding experiences. Jen had mentioned her nipples were torn up with her daughter, and I wanted to know if it was the case with Leo too. It was not. Jen never noticed a clicking sound. She never noticed milk dribbling out of the sides of the mouth, which is not an indication of a great feed, but rather of a disruption of the vacuum seal, which the tongue is responsible for. The symptoms Jen is describing, sleepiness at the breast, no milk transfer, long breastfeeds, all of these signs point to tongue tie. She told me her pediatrician evaluated for tongue tie and said there was not a tongue tie present. Unfortunately, evaluating for tongue tie is not part of a pediatrician's training, yet they often will tell parents there is not one present because they do not see an anterior tongue tie, and because many of them have a belief that tongue tie does not cause breastfeeding difficulty, again, because tongue tie is not part of their medical training. We can't be sure that this is what was going on for Jen because we can't hit rewind, but I suspect that this is what made breastfeeding so difficult for her. We'll hear that Jen also has some suspicions of her own, so keep listening to hear what hers are.
And I was actually, because my friends and I were so comfortable pumping around one another, my girlfriend and I were pumping in the same room. And she goes, "Oh, I'm done." I'm like, "You're done already?" And she's, "Oh, yeah, I get everything in the first 7 minutes." And I stopped. I'm like, "Wait, you get that much milk in 7 minutes?" She's, "Oh, yeah." And then it just stops. And then that's it. They're empty. And I'm like, I don't start my letdown until 7 minutes in. And because that's how I was doing it, I was timing it. And so I would start pumping for longer and longer. I wouldn't get a real letdown for 7 minutes on either one of my breasts anytime I pumped. And I thought that was normal. I thought that was completely normal. I would massage them. I tried hot packs, and it wouldn't come. at least 7 minutes every single time. And so I would pump for 20 because I would get all of my milk at the end. And it got me thinking, I just thought, is that why my kids struggled on the breast? Is because my letdown is just not happening in time. They get frustrated, they get, they lose their latch, they fall asleep. It just makes me wonder now if that was the problem all along. And it's just, I don't know. I haven't had any children since, and I don't intend to have more children. And so I don't know that I want to test out that theory, but
right. Yeah. 7 minutes is a long time for a milk release.
Mm-hmm.
Usually we expect the milk to release within 2 or 3 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
Now, several things could be impacting that with a pump.
Mm-hmm.
And behavior on a pump is not always going to be what's happening with the baby.
Yeah.
So we can't always say that that's exactly what's happening when the baby is latched.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's interesting. It's interesting to think about that.
And
20 minutes is not excessive for pumping.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
That's
20
good to
minutes.
hear.
Yeah. When I see people are pumping for 30, 45 minutes, an hour, then I start think, okay, let's tweak this. This. But 20 minutes, that's not,
That's reasonable.
That's a reasonable amount of time.
That's good to hear.
Yeah. Although waiting 7 minutes for a letdown, for a milk release, that's a lot.
Because it would be, I'd get a little bit, right? Just drops for 7. I'm like, I just gotta wait it out. We'll get there.
Yeah, that's interesting. And you were using the massage mode. What lanches were you in?
Oh gosh, I have no idea.
Yeah.
No idea. I think they were large. They were the larger ones. Yeah. So I had switched at one point, trying something bigger, hoping that it would be faster. Or I tried a few things, but it was really disappointing.
Yeah.
It was really disappointing, and I'm still disappointed about it because those few times I got good feeds and that bonding time, it's just, I remember it even now. It's just, you crave it. I just crave that feeling. It's so magical. I'm sure, I bet you have every mom that you talk to says it is magical.
Yeah, not every mom. And I think it's so important for people to hear a variety of stories. I do think the urge to feed our babies is deeply biological, but the experience for everybody is not magical.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true.
And there are so many barriers to breastfeeding now. And I don't know what happened. I don't know what happened with your baby feeding. It's a mystery.
I know. It is a mystery. And it hurts my heart. It does, because like I said, I grew up very comfortable with it, a family who was very supportive of it, friends who were very supportive of it. I didn't know what it would look like. I was just nervous, but I knew I wanted to. And yeah.
And I would like to think that if I was there and I was your lactation consultant, that I would be able to help you solve it. But sometimes my job is just to help people grieve their lost experience.
Yeah. I know I would love to have had someone to come in and say, hey, this is the problem, and here's how we fix it. And I thought that lactation cafe would be the answer, but they looked at me like, I don't know.
Yeah, that is so discouraging.
Yeah.
So those are the kinds of things that keep me up at night. And part of the problem is that there is just not enough people studying lactation science.
Yes.
And that is one of the systemic barriers that we are shining a light on here on the Milk Making Minutes, because we have to have enough people care about it for things to change.
Yeah.
And when pediatricians and nurses who provide that first line care only receive 3 hours of breastfeeding education and then don't refer out to the people who receive 95 hours to be able to sit for their exams and then constant continuous education, firstly, And then there isn't enough. All the studies we have are like 10 years old, or there are recent studies, but they're hard to find. Yep. And so it becomes challenging to be able to give people the answers they're looking for.
Yeah. And I think back to those times and I think, oh my gosh, if I would have been listening to podcasts or been a podcaster listening, how amazing would it have been to be able to listen to this, to Milk Making Minutes, while you're up in the middle of the night with nothing to do except feed your baby and struggle with that. But to hear, oh yeah, there's someone else who's up in the middle of the night right now too, and she is struggling, and I'm not alone. I'm not alone in this journey. And they should just be given a card when they check out of the hospital. Like, here, while you're breastfeeding, listen to this podcast.
Exactly. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, that's the hope, is that people can feel a sense of connection and know that they're not alone, whether they're having a euphoric experience or whether they're really struggling and they have a mystery case that nobody can solve. Oh, it's so disheartening sometimes, but I commend you for pumping for as long as you did and providing all of that breast milk for your 2 living children. That is so amazing. Thank you. It really, really is.
Thank you.
That was no easy task.
No. Truly a labor of love, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I loved my breastfeeding experience, even though it was a disaster.
Yeah.
So, I would do it again.
Yeah. As we close out, can you tell us a little bit more about your podcast and what you're providing to your listeners so that people can know where to find you and know what to expect when they tune in?
Absolutely. The podcast is Landscape of Loss, and I am the host. I am taking guests on our show all the time to talk about, number one, the stories of their children and their experiences, and to help shine a light on pregnancy and infant loss and child loss for the community. And then we are also talking with resources and professionals and providers in the community, whether that be mental health advocates, physicians, funeral home directors, natural healing specialists, all of those, to talk about their experiences and what they've seen in their field and how they might be able to help. And so really creating an intersection of support for both just the general public, lost parents, and providers.
That is so amazing, because as you shared your story, it sounds like you did not have that.
I didn't.
You did not have a go-to resource when you were experiencing your own child loss, infant loss, and so amazing for parents who are experiencing that themselves to have a place where they can go and know that they're not alone, but also I'm sure they can scroll through the titles and see, oh my gosh, she had a funeral director on, let me listen to this one.
And I think it's all about what we didn't have. How do we create something for the people that are going to come behind me, right? There will be, unfortunately, those numbers, those staggering statistics of 24,000 babies per year are stillborn. And that has not changed. That number has not changed in 10 years, unfortunately. And I knew that there would be more behind me. And I just felt if I can provide them something that would have been helpful for me, then maybe my son's death makes a difference for someone else. And it helps heal my heart too.
Of course. Yeah. Amazing. Okay. We'll link where people can find you in the show notes.
Sounds great.
Okay. Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing your story.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
Sometimes there are those mystery cases when many qualified and competent experts have tried to help a breastfeeding dyad and cannot figure out how to help. But more often than not, people are failed by a system that does not prioritize human milk feeding to our babies and the mental health of moms. I wish I could hit a reset button and go back to help Jen, but there is no such magic button. And despite really difficult circumstances, she did amazing and provided breast milk for her oldest and youngest babies for a really long time. This truly was a labor of love. If you can relate to any part of Jen's story, I'm telling you that you are an amazing mom. You did an amazing job. If you know someone who this story reminds you of, please share this episode with them to bring them healing through solidarity, and so that they can get the reminder that they are doing a great job too. If you would like to listen to Jen's podcast or connect with her, all of her information is in the show notes.